So I began dancing when I was 8. My mother, who had been a student of ballet as a young woman and into her early adult life, brought my sister and I to a ballet school in Framingham, run by a woman named June Paxman, who was a amazing teacher. She had been a student of a woman named Lisa Gardner at Washington Ballet, and Lisa was a student of Anna Pavlova's. So that was my beginning training, which was the old Russian training, beautiful épaulement, beautiful port de bras, turnout, and I immediately took to it. I loved it immediately, and I was good at it. So, you know, as a kid, when you're good at something, it makes you more interested. And my mom was very young and had a lot of energy, so she helped me to pursue my interest in it by taking me into Boston every day to start studying at the Boston Ballet with Virginia Williams. And I also got to perform with them in The Nutcracker and Alice in Wonderland. And my second year at the school, I did Clara in The Nutcracker, which was a big deal. It's actually still a big deal. Can I tell a little story about that?
Yeah.
Yeah. When I staged Midsummer Night's Dream for Boston Ballet in 2006, and when I staged that ballet, there are 25 children in the ballet, so I worked with the students of Boston Ballet, teaching it to them, and they were all just terrific kids. And the night of the opening show, the director, Mikko Nisanen, showed them a program which had a little story about me having been a child in the school, and it had a picture of me as Clara in Nutcracker. And those children were more impressed with the fact that I had been Clara in Nutcracker than that I had worked with Balanchine or anybody. You know, like, to them, that's like the big deal. So when I was 10, I did Clara, which was a big deal. And I was also lucky because my mom had training in ballet. She understood that I had this talent that she needed to sort of nurture. So she also found other teachers for me to study with, including this woman, Harriet Hochter, who was a star of the Ziegfeld Follies, and she did Fred Astaire films, and she taught me about being fearless, not to be afraid of things that were challenging. I used to take private lessons with her, and I also studied and did recitals with her. And I also met another woman named Margaret Gill. We used to call her Peggy, and she was from England. She was from, you know, the RAD training, sort of, you know, similar probably to David Howard, and she had a small school in Framingham also, and my mom took me to her, and Peggy used to take her students to New York every year, and she saw me and she said to my mom, "I want to take Sandy to New York to audition for School of American Ballet." And at that time, I had already seen the New York City Ballet. I saw them. They came to Boston when I was 10, and I fell in love with the repertory of George Balanchine. And I decided at 10 years old that that was my dream, to dance for Balanchine and dance with the New York City Ballet. But at that time, I was a tiny little 10-year-old, so, you know, you never know how to pursue a dream like that. So this woman actually took me to New York and took me over to the School of American Ballet, and they put me in a pretty high class for an 11-year-old. I was in B level, which is usually like 13, 14-year-olds. And they liked me right away, but they were concerned because I was so tiny. I was really small for my age, and they were worried that I might not grow, so they wanted to keep an eye on me. And so I went back to Boston. I continued my training, and in the summers, my mom used to take me to Saratoga Springs, New York, where New York City Ballet summered, and I started performing children's roles with the company, and you know, went to the shows every day and just fell more in love. And I studied at the Brianskis summer dance camp, and I studied with both of the Brianskis, Oleg and I think it's Mirel. And Also, Janet Reed was one of the teachers. She had been a ballerina with New York City Ballet and American Ballet Theater. So I had wonderful training. When I was 12, I got a scholarship to study at a dance camp in Dorset, Vermont with a woman named Marina SVETLOVA. And there I studied also with a woman named Natalie Krasovska, who, if you ever saw the Ballet Russe movie, did you see that movie?
I haven't, no.
She's heavily featured in the movie, and she was one of my teachers, and so that was an amazing summer because I had a full scholarship. And the next year I got my first scholarship to School of American Ballet to study for the summer. I was 13, and I went, and it was, for me, my eyes like opened. I'd never seen training like this. Amazing teachers. One of them was Stanley Williams, who was this famous teacher from the Royal Danish Ballet, and his training was so advanced, and so it's like he took ballet to a whole nother level. And in 5 weeks of summer course, I learned so much, and I came back to Boston a changed dancer. And Virginia Williams, who was the director of Boston Ballet, the founding director, and still there then, saw the difference, and she decided she was going to create a new ballet for me, and she created a new Alice in Wonderland, which she did just for me. And it premiered, I think it was like about February of that coming year, and
Which was one?
I think it was 1971.
71.
And but my dream was to go to School of American Ballet and full-time as a full-time student and be a dancer in New York City Ballet. So Violette Verdi gave me the Ford Foundation scholarship that would allow me to be there for the winter. And Diana Adams, who was the head of the school at that time, also really wanted me there. They just still were concerned I was quite tiny. And so I left Boston, and Virginia was very upset with me because she wanted me to be there. And I went to the school. I had a full scholarship, Ford Foundation scholarship, paid for my tuition, my housing, and my private school because I was in high school. So I went to PCS. I was 14, so I was in 10th grade. My teachers were Alexandra Danilova, who was Balanchine's muse and early ballerina. They left Russia together, and Filia Dubrovska, who was a ballerina with the Ballet Russe under Diaghilev, and he created Prodigal for her, the Siren. He created one of the roles in Apollo for her, and she was amazing, amazing woman. I had Muriel Stewart, who was also a student of Anna Pavlova's, and she was one of my teachers. She was amazing teacher, taught beautiful port de bras and gorgeous combinations. And then we had also Madame Tumkovsky, who was very strict and strong, but great. And Helene Duden. We had Elise Ryman, who was an original dancer of Balanchine's in America. Stanley Williams. So those were some of my teachers, and we had different guest teachers and stuff. But and eventually the following year, Suki Shura became a teacher at the school. She had been still dancing when I first arrived. And that first year I was at the school when I was 14, Dubrovska wanted Balanchine to take me in the company because she felt I was ready. And so she went to Mr. Balanchine and she said, we have this girl in the school. She's 14, but she's ready. And he said, I'm not taking young girls anymore. He said, I want them to all have at least a high school diploma. So I continued at the school, which was great because I had an amazing couple of years there, 2.5 years before I got into the company. And when I joined the company, I had my high school diploma, so.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah. In 1974, Mr. Balanchine invited me to join the company, and I was there for almost 10 years, like 9.5 years, until his death. And then shortly after his death, I left the company. I was in a lot of ballets that he created. He did a solo in Ballo della Regina that was created for a girl named Cheryl Ware, but he created it on her and myself. It was for both of us, but Mr. B was funny because he would often have, Cheryl and I guess he considered us similar in our energy or something, even though we were different. So Cheryl and I would learn a lot of roles together, and then he would switch it at the last minute. He'd have me do something else. And with that ballet, he created this one solo on both of us. And then I never danced it. He put me in a different solo. So he put me in a jumping solo. So it was really, you know, I don't know. It was interesting. But he, you know, he taught class every day. We had him every day for class. He worked with us on, you know, every ballet we did, we worked with him on. I was an original in Union Jack, Vienna Waltzes, obviously Ballet, Chaconne. He brought Walpurgisnacht from Paris Opera to New York City Ballet. They're doing that this week here. And I was one of the girls that was in it originally, but it was already created. A lot of the ballets that I did, they already existed.
So
Yeah.
you said when you were younger, Stephen was dancing with the company.
Mm-hmm.
Anything you can say there? That would be...
Well, I mean, Stephen, when I first went to Boston Ballet, I was very young. I think I was like 9, and he was a principal dancer, so we were all in awe of him. He was very beautiful, you know, long legs, beautiful legs and feet, and very quiet and very gentlemanly, and, you know, a wonderful dancer. Great role model, I think. Well, I think Stephen really went on and had a much bigger career than he had at Boston, although I think he danced a lot in Boston, but I think he went off to Europe and danced at Stuttgart and Geneva with Pat Neary, and, you know, that, I think a lot of that, plus Virginia Williams in Boston was, I mean, Mr. Balanchine really helped that company exist. He gave his work to them. He talked to the Ford Foundation in order for them to have funding. So he was a huge advocate for that company, as well as Pennsylvania Ballet. You know, I can't remember the exact date, but I think it was 1981. It could have been 82, 81, 82. We found out that we used to call him Mr. B, had to have a bypass surgery. They were not concerned that we were going to lose him, but there's always that chance there could be an emergency. So at that time, he was informed by his lawyer that if something happened to him, that his ballets would be left to his brother in the Soviet Union, who was his only living heir, and his brother, because he lived in the Soviet Union, would not be allowed to own those ballets. So the ballets would have gone to the Soviet Union, and that is not what Mr. Balanchine wanted. So he created a will in which he left his work, and really the I guess the copyrights, or, you know, whatever the legal terms are, to certain people, which they became his heirs. One of them being his ex-wife Tanakia Leclerc, who had been struck by polio in the 1950s, and he always took care of her. So he wanted to make sure that in case of his death that she would be taken care of. And then he had other people in his life that he wanted to also make sure that, you know, he could care for them in some way, and he trusted them to leave the work. And so that was, the initial thing was a will that was drawn up, and then when Mr. B actually died, which was not from that bypass, he came back and created new ballets for a couple of years before he actually died.
But that kind of started a trend, though, correct? That trust.
Well, it wasn't a trust initially. He had a will. And then when he died, there was a trust formed by all of the heirs. What they did, they all got together with a lawyer, and they created the George Balanchine Trust, which it was set up because there are so many companies all over the world that want to do Mr. Balanchine's work. And so they needed the heirs couldn't be responsible for all of that. So they needed to have an organization set up to respond to this need for these ballets to be danced. So they formed the George Balanchine Trust, which the original head of the George Balanchine Trust was Barbara Horgan, who was Mr. Balanchine's personal assistant for many, many years of his life. And she, you know, she, along with other people that worked with her and the trustees, would decide if a company would want to do a ballet, if the company could do the ballet, if they had the dancers and the ability to do the ballets. And then upon decision, a positive decision of them getting to do the ballets, then they would send what they call repetiteurs to actually stage the ballets. And those are the people that basically repeat the work. Repetiteur, I think it's a term from the opera world. And you know, we stage the ballets, we teach the choreography as Mr. Balanchine intended it, and we teach the style, the musicality. We're also responsible to make sure the orchestra is playing the right tempos. We're responsible for the production to make sure that sets, costumes, lights, all of that are in, you know, in accordance with what Mr. Balanchine wanted. So
there's a trust and there's a foundation.
Balanchine Foundation is a completely different organization, which was started by a woman named Nancy Reynolds, who'd actually danced for the New York City Ballet. They wanted to do was have, besides the trust, which is really, you know, responsible for the works being done at different companies, the foundation is more interested in the historical preservation of his work, and they have, over the years, they've filmed dancers who originated roles in ballets. For example, for Temperaments, they had Todd Bolander, when he was alive, coaching Phlegmatic with a dancer from New York City Ballet that was dancing at that time. So all of that is filmed and it's archived. So the hope is that in 100 years, when we'll all be gone and when the ballets are no longer copyrighted, that people will care enough to look and see what these people said about what Mr. Balanchine's original intentions were. That being said, Mr. B changed too. So what he might have done originally for Todd Bolander may have changed over the years for different dancers. So, you know, there's probably a lot of archived videotape of performances, and that's the foundation is historical photographs, movies, stuff like that. I think that after the fall of the wall in Germany and the end of the Soviet Union as a communist country, I think that there was a lot of influx of Russian, what we call Soviets trained style dancers, and it's really different from the old Russian training. It kind of morphed over the years because of a lot of the Russians having died or left. Even Vaganova died, and they still say the Vaganova training, but it's really different from what Vaganova actually taught, I believe. And so what I feel really lucky that I was alive when I was, because I had such a pure training. And a lot of it was, I think a lot of the original training was based on Cicchetti, who was, he was the ballet master for Petipa. And so a lot of our training from Mr. B and from our teachers was Cicchetti based, and it's very simple. And but it's a great pure training that frees you to be able to do any style. And I think sometimes the training today is not as good. But that being said, there's still amazing teachers out there and wonderful dancers. Ballet is a French, it's all in French. So it's a common language for all of us. It's just that different teachers, different schools have different emphasis on things. And, you know, I think that it's more so now than it was before. More so different styles of training. But, you know, as Mr. B used to say, and I think this is really the truth, there are two kinds of teaching in ballet: good and bad. It's really simple. And some training is really good, and even if it's a little different, it's still good. But some training is just bad. No, I just feel that I think that having worked on all these ballets, that the dancers are just getting stronger every time I see them. I mean, you know, for example, Corinne, I watched her yesterday working on her solo in Walpurgis, and she's just grown so much in a couple of years since I've seen her. It's wonderful to see.